Welcome to Liberty Revealed, the only show where you will learn about all things liberty. Your host for the show is a registered libertarian who's been involved in politics for more than 25 years. He has a passion for teaching others about the concept of personal liberty. Please welcome your host, Mike Mahoney.
I am a big believer in personal liberty. To me, my rights end where your rights begin. What this means is laws should ensure that your freedom to live your life as you choose does not impact everyone else's freedom to live their lives as they choose. This is personal liberty. If you want to learn more about personal liberty and get more from this show, sign up to receive my 10-page guide on personal liberty entitled Liberty Revealed. You need to fill out a simple form located at yogispodcastnetwork.com/Liberty Revealed. That's YOGIS podcastnetwork.com/Liberty Revealed. Once you read through that ebook, you are guaranteed to be in a position to apply the philosophy of personal liberty.
Hey everybody, this is Mike and I'm the host of the Liberty Revealed show. Thanks for being back. Today I've got a guest and his name is Ethan Ellis. Ethan is the host of the new End of Politics podcast. He describes himself as a leftist and an extremely early academic. He loves history and politics. Welcome to the show, Ethan.
It's good to be on. I'm glad that you invited me.
So, what is it you want to talk about today?
I was hoping to talk about the Venezuelan crisis and sort of like the conversation writ large about how that's developing and who's all involved in it.
Okay, that's a good topic. Now, but before we do that, I got a little surprise for you. I want to give you the world's smallest political quiz.
Okay.
And it's something I'm going to start doing with all of my guests going forward. And you are the very first one, so congratulations on that. And basically, I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? And you're going to here's your three choices, okay? You can either say, I agree, you can say maybe, or you can say disagree.
Okay.
And then when we're done, we're going to calculate your results and we're going to see something interesting. I have a feeling. So the first question is, or the first statement, and you tell me if you agree, maybe, or disagree. Government should not censor speech, press, media, or internet.
Maybe.
Okay. Military service should be voluntary. There should be no draft.
Yes, there should be no draft.
Okay. There should be no laws regarding sex for consenting adults.
Yes, if it's for consenting adults.
Repeal laws prohibiting adult possession and use of drugs.
Yes, so that it's no longer, you cannot retroactively make something illegal, or you can continue to make it.
Okay. There should be no national ID card.
Maybe. I want to say maybe on that.
Okay. Then the next one. End corporate welfare. No government handouts to business.
Yes. I'm pretty firm on that, yes.
End government barriers to international free trade.
No.
Okay, disagree with that one. Let people control their own retirement. Privatize Social Security.
No.
Okay. Replace government welfare with private charity.
No.
Okay. And cut taxes and government spending by 50% or more.
I guess that just kind of depends on what we're cutting and where it's being reallocated to. In a sense. So
is that a maybe?
I think that's probably a maybe. It's a strong maybe. Yeah.
Let's see what your results are.
Where am I?
You exactly who you labeled yourself as. So what the world's smallest political quiz does is it has a diamond, and on the bottom is big government. On the top is libertarian. To the right is conservative. To the left is liberal. And then there's centrist. And you fall 80-20 on the left. So
sounds pretty fair.
I would say you accurately described yourself. So good for you. Well, not, and you know, it's funny. Most people don't come out with what they think they're going to come out with. And it was looking in the beginning of that quiz like you weren't going to, because you were all on the agree, which would have put you at the top at libertarian, by the way. But I'll send you the screenshot of this, but because you're sort of like 40 is where libertarian starts, and you're at like 80-20, so you're pretty close.
I have heard left libertarianism as a concept described to me. So that's kind of, I guess it's fair in a way to say.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm more of a centrist libertarian, so I kind of fall a little bit lower I fall a little more to the right, but a little higher up on the scale than you did. But so tell me, what are your thoughts about this Venezuela situation and what's going on there?
I would say that the way it's being handled and how it is developed in the fashion that it has is very indicative of an Iraq kind of situation. In the sense that here we have a government that we kind of delegitimized, except in the past, we did it through like an official statement. Now we did it through Twitter. We have, again, delegitimized a left-leaning government who is not perfect, but the alternative was from a party of people that were not politically relevant or understood, simply because they more closely align to our interests. And of course, every like hippie's kind of understanding of the Iraq War, oil, it just so happens that Iraq has nothing on the oil reserves and depositories that Venezuela has and has always had. Except there's a difference, is that Iraq had the capability of being more manageable towards U.S. interests, but the way the Venezuelan government has structured oil in the oil industry, it's not really conducive to our desires. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
So do you think, like I do, that oil is the driving factor here?
I want to say yes, but I guess this is the miracle of this administration, is that whilst there are some people at the highest levels that have this huge level of like corporate cynicism and government cynicism, I would say like Elliot Abrams and like Bolton definitely have that. But then there's this weird ideological driving of that kind of defines as well. You could say people like Pence or Trump, as much as you disagree or agree with them, they're very ideologically motivated. And so I have a feeling that someone is whispering in Trump's left ear saying we've got to get the oil, because on my show there was a clip that showed that he's very business motivated, especially in Libya. He explicitly said that they wanted to go after their oil, but also on his right ear you would get other people whispering how we need to bring the legitimate air quotes government of Venezuela into power. So it's
so you mentioned your podcast, and it's called The End of Politics Podcast. How did you come up with that name?
So it's very dorky, but I am studying to be an historian or a history professor later on in my life. That would be amazing for me. European history mostly, but there is the phrase that you hear, especially around the 21st century in the beginning of the War on Terror, is that we're living in the end of history. But after this point, it will all be homogenized. We will all be of the understanding that there is no more war or conflict, and that the grand theory of economics will lift everyone up, and we'll all be saved by it, and we'll all be rescued. So there doesn't need to be anything to write about any further. It's just the end of history. But as we've all come to understand, the war on terror has been almost a complete objective failure. This is not the end of history. There's still new, like, rising of like left and right wing extremism, or whatever you want to have it. So it's not the end of history. You could say it's the end of political understanding. Whether or not that's good or bad is entirely up to you. But since the era is defined by populism, I decided to think of it as, well, you can no longer judge on a spectrum. It's the end of our current understanding of politics. That's where it came from.
I kind of guessed correctly on that one. I'm surprised. I like the concept though a lot. So here's the thing I worry about. You mentioned the war on terror. I think about the war on drugs.
Yeah.
It seems like every time we, go after some issue, we make it worse. And I wonder what you think about how those things might relate to what's going on in Venezuela, and if, like, God forbid, we were to send troops in there, what do you think might happen?
Well, I think this might be a little different because this is not a terror war. This is not a drug war. This is a resource war. The problem with Iraq is that I think originally we did kind of go into it on a mixture of ideological and resource based. But there doesn't seem to be any large, like, sort of grand concept of terror involved in this. It just seems to be explicitly, we need to remove Maduro. We've been trying to do this in Venezuela for a very long time, since around like the beginning of the 21st century. And you could probably even argue even in the 1990s. We have a very specific goal if we do decide to invade Venezuela: and depose Maduro, support Juan, whose last name I cannot pronounce, as I've been told by my Venezuelan friends to just give up, and establish sort of a neoliberal kind of puppetry. And I think we can be successful in that because we have Juan and his party in the National Assembly. They have a relatively decent base within their country. They're not extremely popular, but they're there. So it is different because there is a framework and there is a structure to go off of. So I don't know if it's the exact same, but I think it has the potential to be as, if not more, violent if it does get out of hand.
Well, one of the things I noticed is, before we talked, I looked up, I Googled support for Maduro, and you get various articles that say they support. But what struck me was that the Washington Post is basically reporting that he'll be removed from power at any moment, essentially. And that hasn't really been my feeling about what's going on there. I feel like we have helped manufacture this issue for whatever the bigger picture reason that they see there is. I personally think it's about oil. I think it's probably 80% about oil.
That's pretty fair.
So it makes me wonder, like, okay, what makes the Washington Post think that he's about to be removed? Like, what do they know that we don't know that he's about to be removed from power? It makes me a little nervous. So what do you think about that?
I would say this is going to sound like really kind of, I guess, cynical, or you maybe even describe it as arrogant, but I say they don't really know anything about the situation, because I would say they're reporting, I think I remember reading that article, is that it's not informed really by boots on the ground in Venezuela. It's very much informed by the mainstream media sort of feedback loop on Venezuela. And from that angle, if you're watching it 24/7, just cars on fire, blockades, these ideas, it does seem like literally any second someone's about to, like, Gaddafi Maduro, but realistically, no. Maduro has quite a decent amount of support behind his cause. He still is pretty popular. He's more popular than Juan has ever been, and his party's ever been, because just despite Maduro not being, I can say that I don't particularly like everything Maduro's done, but I can understand a lot of what he's done. So I do not think that anytime this week or any time near, unless it's through just some mysterious happenings, like, oh my God, he gets, like, shot. Well, through some kind of, I don't know how that happened, or he's poisoned, like, covert U.S. intervention. I don't really see him just kind of just going away, or him being dragged into the streets, because he still has military support. He still has popular support. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's gonna, if they want to remove him, that's what they're gonna have to do, is remove him. And of course, as we've talked about earlier, I am vehemently opposed to anything like that. I think one of the things we've created, like we talked about the war on terrorism, and I sort of chuckle when I think about that, because we created the terrorists ourselves by our policies over the years. And it doesn't really, this is where I say to people, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican or in between or anywhere on the spectrum, because every single person who's taken control, the reins of this country, has made the same mistakes. Obama had us in 8 different wars all at the same time, and yet he ran on a platform of, we're gonna change things and we're gonna get out of these wars. And I think much the same as like when Trump says he's gonna pull everybody out of Syria, I think Obama saying he was gonna pull everybody out of Iraq, it causes the same instability, just in a different area of the world. And that's what it feels like to me. It feels like there's been this ripple effect in the Middle East, and we plug one hole and we create another one somewhere else where the water leaks. So, and I'm kind of concerned about, because now, okay, we've completely messed up the Middle East. We have Europe in a turmoil, and now we're going to mess with South America.
It just feels very 20th century. It just feels like a very repeated kind of, like nothing ever changes in that kind of capacity.
Well, right. What do they say? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It seems like insanity to me. Like, why are we doing this? But then at the same time, like they say that you're right. I can't pronounce his last name either, so I'm going to go along with you. Juan. He's back in the country now, and he's risking arrest. But at the same time, I don't think it's such a high risk, because I think that the Maduro's smart enough not to, make that move unless he had to.
Yeah.
But what do you think of it? What do you think is the ultimate solution here? How do they solve this crisis?
That's a good question. It's a bit complicated in the sense that it's like asking to solve the Middle East in some kind of capacity. But what I will say is there is a pretty decent way to do this. One, just he needs to stop doing what he's doing. He needs to recognize that the only reason his party did not run during the last election had nothing to do with repression. It had everything to do with the fact that it was a very cheap political move designed to delegitimize Maduro, because it has a very North Korea feel to it. If Maduro is the only one running and he wins, well, was there any real competition? They've run in almost every single succinct election aside from that one. So what Juan needs to do is stop attempting to destabilize the Venezuelan government even further than it is, because a big thing that no one really talks about is that the reason why a lot of these economic hardships have hit Venezuela so hard is because the United States has consistently thrown out harsh sanctions in the vein that we do with Iraq, funnily enough, is that we devastate these economies. We wonder how it falls apart so fast. And that's not to say that these sanctions are the only thing killing the Venezuelan economy, but it is a large part of it. If no one is willing to trade with you and there's no foreign, imports, and there's no real trade economy, then you kind of put yourself into a bind, and you have to put yourself into a bind. So the United States needs to stop sanctioning Venezuela. Juan needs to just stop in general. And maybe Maduro needs to pick a successor with someone that will follow up on these left-leaning policies, because they're still very popular. It's just, he has sort of in a last-ditch effort to maintain relevancy and power. He's very much acted like how the opposition's always painted him to be, and it's pushed him into this corner. So, Maduro needs to pick a successor with the ability to continue these needs, because Juan wants to denationalize oil, which is just the craziest concept in my mind to do. It's not popular by any metric. It's popular to some foreign parties. It's not popular in Venezuela. So that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a shift in leadership. The United States needs to stop harshly and brutally continually sanctioning Venezuela. And again, Juan needs to consider a different career, because this is not it. It's not it for him.
How do you feel in general about interventionist policies that we've had current day and in the past?
Oh, they've been awful. The United States, you're right. Earlier when you said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. We are United States. I am not the United States. Are really bad at doing intervention, at doing humanitarian aid, because there's always an ulterior to it. we fight shadow wars, we fight proxy wars, we invade, we destabilize, and then we kind of get to we just hang out there, and we don't provide any extra backup or framework. We obliterated the Taliban and we obliterated Al Qaeda, but what was put in their stead is just a more radical version of what we left behind. And so we just, if we continue to intervene, which we absolutely shouldn't, because I do not have any good faith or will to any president, perhaps maybe one or two in the future, but from Trump past, absolutely not. And you're right, Obama did promise change, but look what happened in Yemen. Look what happened in Syria. These things were already humanitarian crises spurred on by like their neighbors. Saudi Arabia doesn't get blamed enough for that as well. We're still allies with them, but we just need to rethink. We need to restructure. We need to provide aid if we're going to provide aid. Don't just say we are. Don't say that aid is just a Moab we drop on some empty buildings in Syria. Actually provide meaningful structural work if we're going to be there. But I'd say we're probably not going to be there for a very long time. So until then, just we need to pull back. We need to pull out. We need to reallocate these resources because our military is so egregiously bloated, and just sort of everywhere. And then even when we try to privatize these things, like look what happened with Blackwater in Iraq. We're not good at it at all. So that's my take. Stop.
So there's a lot of people who say that the reason we've had these interventionist policies is because they make our leaders richer. There's theories that they make connections with certain groups of people, only way I can think to put it.
Yeah.
And they get payoffs for that in the end. And, there's something that could be said for that when you consider that most of our presidents leave office wealthier than they went in.
Oh, yeah.
I think we'll probably see the possible exception of Mr. Trump. He's probably going to become, less wealthy than he was, but that's okay. That's kind of been his habit. But what do you think about that as a theory? That maybe one of the reasons why we're so addicted to being an interventionist country is that our leaders get rich off of it.
I don't even think I think that's a less of a theory and just more of a law of politics. Is that this happens. Again, as I mentioned earlier, with our involvement in Yemen and how we are aiding Saudi Arabia in that, Saudi Arabia, for pretty much all intents and purposes, we know were the ones that helped propagate and fund 9/11. They were the ones that sort of guided the large quantities of funds they were able to secure, and they helped move it. I even remember what happened with that Canada situation where they basically tweeted at Canada like a threat of like a meme of 9/11 on Twitter. And you see this kind of like very cynical approach to everything. And you see that these nations that provide us with these funds are ostensibly untouchable in our eyes. We don't move against them, even though they are the ones perpetrating these terrorist organizations or helping fund them. Despite us fighting a war on terror, if you wanted to cripple the war on terror really effectively, you would have to start with Saudi Arabia. You'd have to start with these countries. So, and even now, as we speak about what's happening in Venezuela, there's talks about the United States being involved in Colombia and Argentina, and those are not so coincidentally far right governments that have the ability to just kind of write blank checks to American industries and American nationals and just kind of get the ball of policy rolling. So I think, every president, they have like a salary it's a very fixed salary, but it's just very strange that they all walk away with tens or, in some kind of capacity, hundreds of millions of dollars from their job that doesn't really pay, it shouldn't pay all that much. So,
yeah, it's the only analogy I can think of as I was sitting here listening to you is it's like someone who's overweight and they say, I'm gonna do everything I can to lose weight. Like you were talking about how Saudi Arabia is at the center of all this terroristic activity and they're helping fund it. And I completely agree with you on that. And we say we want to take care of terrorism, yet we continue to be best buddies with Saudi Arabia. And it's always we've always been friends with them. Well, the same thing. You're a fat person and you're so overweight, and you go to McDonald's and you order, Big Mac and extra large fries, some chicken McNuggets. But then you get a Diet Coke. Like somehow that Diet Coke was your stand that you're gonna lose weight. You lowered your calories a little bit. So here we are. Saudi Arabia is like our Diet Coke. We're gonna fight terrorism. But and how we're going to fight terrorism is we're going to continue to be friends with the people who helped fund probably one of the biggest disasters we've had in our country, and obviously the largest terrorist attack in our country. And we're going to continue to be friends with them. Like, not even, there were no sanctions, there's nothing. It was just like, okay, it's almost like we have to be friends with them because they've got something on us or something, which I don't think that's the case, but
that's what I would say.
It's just weird, and I wonder sometimes, like, I tell people this all the time. We were talking earlier in the green room about how Trump lies and people just make excuses for it. But at the same time, every president has lied to us. But when they lie to us, it's about foreign policy. That's the number one thing they lie to us about. Is we must, like what did Bush say? There's weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that he knew there weren't, but what I am convinced of is that he didn't look that hard. Once someone that he trusted told him that there were weapons of mass destruction, he was like, okay, let's go do this. Rather than being the reasonable person and saying, bring me proof, show me before I do this, bring me proof. And we seem to do this like over and over and over and over, and there's always some excuse. Look at what's going on with Syria. He's pulling troops out, but oh wait, we're going to completely pull them all out. Oh, but wait a minute, maybe not. Maybe we won't pull them all. Oh, but yes, we will. Oh no, we won't. And I'm not going to be and you said it in the green room too. I'm not going to be an interventionist. This is Trump. I'm not going to be an interventionist. I believe in. He got in trouble for using this word. He's a nationalist, and I don't believe he meant it in the racist way. I think he meant it in the way of America first. But oh hey, here's Venezuela over here, and they have oil. Hey, let's go intervene. What the heck? Like, why? What makes them tick? That's the thing I continually boggles my mind. Like, what makes them tick? And you hear from people, like, I have a lot of friends who've run for office, and one of them is a congressman, and he says the things I can't tell you about are more numerous than the things I can tell you about. That shouldn't be that way.
Dear God.
It just shouldn't be that way. What happened to transparency? And it's our country, and we're doing things for the betterment of our country. It doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like politicians get into office and then they rake in the dough. And then if we're lucky enough that they come from a state where there's term limits, they get little slice of the pie. But if they come from a state like California where there are no term limits, they just go and go and go and go. Dianne Feinstein. We just got rid of Dana Rohrabacher, 30-year congressman. Runs, completely clueless, exactly. But yet also extremely rich. And he wasn't when he went into office. Like, just wow. That's all I can say. So anyway, well, I want to kind of guide us towards wrapping this up. So why don't you let everybody know, like, where they can find you on social media, how they can reach out to you if they want to, how to find your podcast, etc. Just let them know.
All right. So as of yet, my social media is a little limited, but I do have an Instagram page where I post updates on my show and just sort of my thoughts on things and my petty grievances occasionally. It's the End of Politics podcast at Instagram. And if you want to find my YouTube channel, just look up the End of Politics podcast. I'll be on both. My update schedule has been a little turbulent lately, but that's just because school's been a little rough and very busy. But very soon, a lot more is going to be produced. I'll have a lot more ability to edit and make content. And so it's just that is where you can find me. And do subscribe, please.
Well, I will tell everybody, I listened to your 01 episode, and while you describe yourself as extremely leftist, I don't think that your views would, when people hear that, they immediately think like socialist and, etc. And I would say you're anything but that. You kind of proved that in the social aspect of the world's smallest quiz. It was basically in two parts, social and economics. And you definitely don't, you're not a socialist. And I want my listeners to try to check out your show because one of the reasons why we have people on the show is to help educate the listeners a little bit more. And I don't care if my listeners are libertarian, Democrat, Republican, Green Party. We all can learn something from each other. And we need to get back to how things were when I was younger. And I don't want to sound like an old guy that says, back in the day. But, media back then, they reported that, like, if I had a story that would break, every, 2, 4, and 7, the three main media stations, they all reported the same story. Why? Because they reported the truth. They made sure to check things out. Now we go with whatever fits our spin. So if we're CNN, we tend to have a liberal spin. And if we're Fox News, we have a conservative spin. And like, my gosh, trying to figure out what really happened, it's like pulling teeth. So, I think we're going to find out that people like you and I are going to become the media for the masses because they're going to learn that who they can trust, and they're going to come to us for the actual truth about the matter. And I mean, that's where I have another political show that I'm actually going to turn more into an investigative type thing and go in, why is Venezuela happening? Let's find out what the heck is going on. And I'm going to pull in some favors and find out what the heck is going on and report it to the people because I think, blogs used to try to do this, but they've gotten super corrupted as well. And I think that podcasting is the next medium for that. So,
yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, it was really great talking to you. I appreciate it. I hope you come on again. You're more than welcome. You've got an open invitation anytime you want to come on. You have the booking link. Feel free to use it. And thanks again for being here today. I'm going to close up with just saying that, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I'm all about personal liberty. And if you want to learn about what personal liberty is all about, I have a freebie for you. Just go to yogispodcastnetwork.com/liberty revealed. Put your email address in the little box, and I'll immediately send you a really colorful PDF of some examples of personal liberty and what is and what is not personal liberty. So this has been another episode of Liberty Revealed. I'm Mike Mahoney, and my guest has been Ethan Ellis.
Thanks for listening to Liberty Revealed, the show where you learn about all things liberty. Please visit the show's website at yogispodcastnetwork.com/LR, where you can reach out to Mike directly with your questions and comments. Again, that is yogispodcastnetwork.com/LR.